I saw something on a cruise, and now I can't sleep. By Ifrit. Hi, my name's Riley. Just want to give a little background before I explain what happened. It wasn't until I met my fiancée that I really started getting out into the world. Growing up, my family was always one for camping, picnics, or anything else within driving distance, really. Things really changed when I met her. I'll call her Rachel. I wish there was a better way of saying this, but simply put, she makes enough for us to go out and do amazing things and create equally amazing memories. I really do love her though. She's amazing and obviously the one. Okay, I'll spare you the sappy stuff and fast forward to today. We're on a cruise. It's my second one ever and the first one that's lasted longer than one night. Our friends Bill and Sarah are on it with us. We're calling it a birthday cruise since it left the day of Bill's birthday. I wish I were writing to tell you about the awesome parties, poolside cocktails, and everything else cruise-related, but I'm not. I saw something on the first night, and I haven't been able to sleep since. Today is day 2 of this 4-day, 3-night cruise. I'm confused, and I'm hoping someone else here can help me. If you've been on a cruise, you know the rooms are tiny, the coffee is older than the ship, and that the TV section is painfully limited. It was about 10 p.m. and we were laying there in bed for about 30 minutes. I looked at Rachel, and her deep, peaceful breathing told me she was asleep. Still excited from leaving port, and maybe a tad queasy, I decided to turn on the TV to mellow out. I picked up the sad-looking remote from the bedside table, and found a strange comfort in seeing the back held closed by black electrical tape. Being from a somewhat lower-income family, this was a common sight at home. I instantly began to relax and began flipping through the channels. Channel 1 was a channel dedicated to the ship's logistics, where we were, how fast we were going, where we were going, etc. It didn't take long to get bored of that and press down on the ancient tic-tac of a channel up button. The loud clack as it pressed down told me it hadn't been used often. Channel 2 was about ship events. The cruise coordinator, Sol, was on the screen talking about the next day's activities. He was a perplexing individual. I'd call it exhaustingly enthusiastic. His face screamed, "I've been doing this for too damn long," while his voice went into cheery detail about the finer things that are shuffleboard and the proper way to score it. Even the display on screen gave a half-baked cheesy feel. It was clearly shot with Sol in front of a green screen, as the background and shadowing came nowhere close to matching his half-enthused body movements. I could feel my eyes beginning to droop, and I knew it wouldn't be long before I joined Rachel in a long night of sleep. I gave the channel up button one more click. I wish I hadn't. I wish I had just fallen asleep. I wish what I saw was just a dream. I didn't. It wasn't. The screen flipped to the next channel, but it wasn't channel 3. It was channel 228. I didn't think much of it in the brief instance between reading the number and my mind visually interpreting what the screen was displaying. It wasn't like the previous 2 channels. It was grainy, black and white, and there was no sound. I assumed that this was just a really old film at first. One of the old ones with no sound and intermittent text boxes to fill the void. In any case, I was intrigued and suddenly less sleepy. I watched, and the crashing of the waves against the outside of the ship was the only sound to keep me company whilst I did. The screen showed a top-down view of what looked like a very old hospital bed. The room appeared to be dark and rustic, with a cement floor and less than optimal lighting. There was a man on the bed in just boxer briefs. He was alive based on his gradual movement, no more than slowly moving his head from one side to the other. But I can't say with any certainty what state of consciousness he was in. He wasn't just strapped in, he appeared to be chained in. His legs were chained together, the chain wrapped from his legs to the underside of the bed. His arms were chained out over the edge of the bed with his limp hands facing downward, another chain wrapped tightly around his neck and around the bed, just like his legs. On either side of him were two men. I would have assumed they were doctors, but they weren't wearing any sort of scrubs. They were wearing suits. Nice suits. One of the men looked a bit on the stubby, larger side, with short, wavy, slicked back hair. He appeared middle-aged from what I could see. The other man was the opposite. Dark hair, taller, leaner, and noticeably younger. I'd say in his late 20s. It was very hard to tell with the video quality being what it was. They stood with arms behind their backs, looking down at the man on the bed. I watched as another man entered the picture. I can say that he definitely resembled that of a doctor. He had at least a long white jacket on, and had a number of sharp objects in the tray he carried over. He was entirely bald, and had a white goatee with what looked like circle-framed glasses. The doctor pulled out one of the sharp objects off his tray and examined it, twisting it from side to side in his fingers. He then looked down at the man in the bed. I could see the doctor's mouth move, but couldn't make out what he was saying. In one quick movement, the doctor swiftly moved the sharp object parallel about halfway up the man's left arm, down to his left wrist. I expected the man in the bed to lurch or tense up, but he didn't. The nicely dressed men seemed to have no reaction either. Blood began to ooze at a steady pace from his left arm, while the doctor moved to the other side of his body. I knew what was coming next. Another swift movement, and a second flow of blood. I hadn't noticed until this point, but there were two square white containers under each arm to catch the blood. The dark blood now pooling in the bottom was an easy contrast to see against the whiteness that had surrounded it. All three of the other men in the room stood just looking down at this poor man. What happened next is what keeps me from sleeping. I must have watched the screen for a good 2 to 3 minutes whilst the stream of blood from the man's wrist went from a steady flow to a few light drips every few seconds. I noticed his head was no longer moving from side to side. I don't know why I kept watching. The cynical doubt of this being an old horror movie had already crept inside my head. Maybe it was a morbid fantasy, or maybe I was holding on to the smallest shred of hope that some credits would begin to scroll up the screen. At that moment we hit what I assumed to be some rougher seas, and I heard a particularly hard wave from outside, and the boat lurched to the left. I kept my eyes on the screen and watched in horror as the blood that filled the containers sloshed to the left-hand side in unison. It wasn't a movie. This was a video stream, and it was from somewhere on the ship. I quickly but quietly picked up the TV guide card to try and figure out what channel 228 was supposed to be. But the card only had channels from 1 through to 30. You know that feeling of being watched? With the hair stand up on the back of your neck, and you get that tickle in your throat, where your breath sounds like a hurricane and any movement of your joints sound like the loudest creaking door from your grandparents' house. I felt it. I felt it bad. I stared at the card. I held my breath and slowly moved my head and eyes up. I could hear the joints in my vertebrae creaking as my eyes met the screen. All three men were staring back. I sat motionless, unable to think. The picture faded to static. I have no idea what the fuck that was, or what the fuck to do. I don't want to tell Rachel and ruin her trip in case this was just some crazy fluke murder mystery show. But I just have a horrible feeling that it's not. And why the fuck were they staring back? Dramatic effect? It just felt like they were staring directly through the screen at me. I looked through the cruise activity catalogue and saw nothing relating to a murder mystery. I'm too scared to ask anyone who works on the ship about it. I think I'm going to talk to Bill about it and see what he says. He's one of my oldest friends and I know I can trust him. It's only a matter of time before the lack of eating and dark circles under my eyes give me away anyways. Maybe talking to him will make me feel good enough to get a few hours tonight. Hopefully. Maybe a drink will ease my mind for now. You guys are simply amazing. I took a lot of what you said and tried to limit any consumption of any sort. And I made sure to only do it when someone of my group was around. Also, sorry I didn't respond to more comments. The opportunities to do so were few and far between. I also didn't have my phone with me a lot of the day due to some of the activities we took part in. I also tried my best to never be alone, but some things made that quite difficult. You'll understand more in a bit. I'm looking forward to any more help you all have to offer. I'm so glad I posted here. I have an update for you, but I don't have a lot of answers, just a lot more questions. Right now it's very early in the morning, about 5 AM on the third day, and I'm typing this in the dark outside on one of the decks. The light on my phone screen is turned way down. I don't want anyone to know I'm here or that I have my phone. I'll explain more in a bit. So after I finished my update yesterday, I laid in bed for several hours until Rachel woke up. The both of us got changed and got hold of Sarah and Bill and some walkie-talkies we brought. The plan was to meet up at the general buffet for breakfast. After getting there and making our way through a small horde of people, we found a table and sat with our food. The morning chat was light. We were all still pretty tired and groggy. Me for the most. So there wasn't much beyond the "how did you sleep" and comments about the activities listed for the day. I tried my best not to give off a vibe that something was wrong. Eventually, we had made our way through the majority of our meals. Both Rachel and Sarah got up to go use the restroom. I know what you're thinking. How could you possibly let them go off alone like that? I had to. It's really hard to try and convince someone not to be alone without raising too many questions. I kept solace in the fact that at least 2 of them were together. It's the best I could do for now. While they were gone, I asked Bill if he could spare a few minutes in the evening to talk about something. About Bill and Sarah. Bill is a very tall guy. Though he has a bit of a beer belly, he doesn't come off as fat. He just comes off as a taller, bigger gentleman. He has short dark hair and dark eyes and usually wears dark clothing, including a beanie, to fit his demeanor. Sarah is a perfect match for him. She's not quite as tall, and drinks lightly, so certainly no beer belly, but also dresses in darker clothing with dark hair and dark eyes. One interesting thing about her is that she is allergic to the sun. She will start to get a bad sunburn after as little as 60 seconds of direct sunlight. No, she's not a vampire. This also means that her skin is much more on the pale side than most. I went to high school with both of them, but they didn't even start hanging out or dating until well after we all graduated. In any case, I could tell Bill wasn't catching on to the seriousness of my tone. Bill and Sarah are married. Not to say that they don't have an awesome marriage, they definitely do, but there are moments for all of us, married or just dating, when we'll just try to go for a night out with the boys. That's what Bill thought this was. I could tell he thought I was giving him an excuse to get out for the night and party. While he obviously didn't pick up on the narrowed eyes, non-smiling mouth, and shaking legs when I asked him, his yearning to get out inevitably worked in my favor as he happily agreed. We'd made plans to meet up around 7 PM near the casino. I could tell he was a bit confused though when I told him not to mention anything about it to Sarah. He reluctantly obliged. The 4 of us spent the rest of the day together. I was essentially trying to get my mind off things. We went to the arcade and did some swimming. I know a lot of you wanted me to avoid anything public, but similar to my point above, I just couldn't do anything without raising questions. I know Rachel wouldn't want to sit in our stateroom all day either, so that would mean she would be out on the boat all by herself, possibly with the other 2 of our group, but without being with her, there was no way of knowing for sure. I should probably preface that this cruise was down near the equator, so roughly 12 hours of sun and 12 hours of night each day. At around 6:30, We returned to our rooms to switch from casual wear to nicer clothes. Nights were still very cold, surprisingly. Rachel said she would go with me to the casino and then let us boys do our thing. Sarah must have had a similar thought, since all four of us showed up at the same time together. I could see the relief in Bill's eyes that Rachel had come, and Rachel took quick action in scooping Sarah off to some loud-ringing slot machine on the other side of the casino. I was relieved in my own way that neither of the girls would be alone. I immediately led Bill away from the crowded smoky area into a nearby whiskey lounge. We took some chairs in a space in the corner away from the others, and I divulged to him what I had seen. Wow. Really? That's fucked up. I could tell that his second glass of whiskey was already having an impact on him. I, on the other hand, and at the advice of many of you, had barely taken 2 sips out of my glass. I don't know what to do. I mean, it probably wasn't real, right? It was just a show, right? I have no idea, man. I didn't see it, so I can't say for sure. Are you sure you weren't dreaming? Doubt begun to seep back into my mind. Well, now I'm not sure. I was pretty sleepy just before switching the channels, but like I said, I haven't really slept since, so I don't really remember waking up from it, if it were a dream. That's a good point. So, what would you do if you were in my position? Honestly? Before I could advise against any further consumption of alcohol, he took a generous sip of his whiskey. I could tell it didn't go down right. Bill looked at me, and I could tell he was about to borrow that whiskey rather than own it. He bolted for the bathroom and left me there to wait. I chuckled. For the first time in what felt like an eternity. Alcohol was free on the trip, and Bill was certainly making use of that. This is probably why I was surprised when the waiter showed up with a check for our drinks. I thought the drinks are free, I asked, looking with a furrowed brow at my bill. The waiter took a slightly uncomfortable time to respond and finally said, "Not all the drinks," in a very monotone, quiet voice. I read down the line of items of the drinks. Far more ordered by Bill than myself. I felt quite guilty letting him consume that much of anything, let alone alcohol. Especially knowing what I had known. Then I saw the total at the bottom. $2.28 fucking cents. $2.28. I snapped my head back up to the waiter and he was gone. I looked around cautiously. There were just a few other people in the area. If they had noticed anything, they were doing a very good job of pretending they didn't. I looked back at what had been handed to me. Closer inspection showed that it didn't really resemble much of a receipt at all. It wasn't handwritten, but it was very crude. The lines of the drinks were right. This sent a chill down my spine. Someone had watched us the entire time and knew everything we drank. I waited for a few more minutes for Bill to return, but my paranoia got the best of me and I left quickly for my room. Hopefully he could find the girls once he was done doing what he had to do. I know that this was dumb, but I just couldn't stay there waiting for something to happen. As I made my way through the ship, I tried my best to control my adrenaline and slow my pace down as to not draw attention to myself. I still moved as quickly as I could up the staircases. Somehow being in the confined space of the elevators seemed very unappealing. I got to my floor and navigated down the hallway, decorated with various exotic fish and somewhat dated wood-paneled walls. I got to the end, my room. I stood for a few moments with my back pressed against the door, almost as if I was trying to keep someone out. But to the best of my knowledge, I wasn't being followed. The only sounds were the thoughts in my head and the waves outside still crashing against the ship. For a moment, I felt incredibly alone, staring out of the window of our room over the railing of our balcony to the vast expanse of white-capped waves breaking against the twilight of a once sunny day turning into a moonlit night. Something was happening on this ship. Obviously, the people in charge had to know about it. But why? I tried to think about my next move, but my mind clouded and I could only come up with one solitary, cohesive thought. Turn on the TV. What did I have to lose at this point? Things were already getting out of hand. Someone knew what I had seen, and they made sure I knew that they knew. As far as I could tell, I was as good as fucked. So against what I would perceive to have been my better judgment, I flipped on the TV. It was already on channel 228. I thought for a moment about turning it off, but I was actually strangely relieved by what I saw. Deck 15, 5:30 a.m. was all it displayed in flashing, big red block letters against a black background. I knew immediately what this meant. Someone wanted to meet up with me. I went to reach for my phone to take a picture. Right then, my walkie-talkie chirped. It was Rachel. The TV shut off entirely, but her voice still helped me to feel at ease with the situation.
Babe, are you there? Where are you and Bill at?
Me and Bill? What the fuck? Instantly, my mind filled with dread. He hadn't made it back to them after I left. Was he okay? Did he just go back to the room not feeling well? Questions began to fill my mind.
Riley?
I snapped back to reality and snatched up the walkie-talkie. Yeah, sorry, I'm here. Are you still at the casino?
No. We went back to Sarah and Bill's room so she could take a shower and get some more cash. Just figured I'd check in.
Motherfucker. He wasn't in the room. Where the fuck was he? I had to think quick. Really quick. I looked at the time. 9 p.m. It was getting late. Yeah, we're still on having fun. I'll be back at the room a little later. Don't wait up for me. Let Sarah know not to wait up for Bill either. I felt like a piece of shit for lying like that. I just didn't want them to worry. But I realized that if Bill was in danger, they were too. Let me know when you get back to your room to go to sleep, just so I know to be quiet when I get in. There was no response. I felt my pulse quicken. I waited and tried to calmly ask again. Rachel, did you hear me? Let me know when you get back to your room. Yeah, sorry, just forgot to press the communication button down. No problem, I'll let you know when I get back. I almost cried hearing her voice. It was the most relief I had felt since I first stepped onto this fucking boat. This sucked. I was supposed to be having fun and creating memories I would never forget. Well, at least the last part of that was true. I immediately set out to find Bill, and honestly, I was getting pissed. I can take quite a bit, but this was starting to cross the line. I still remained cautious without drawing attention to myself, but I felt ready to deal with whatever was about to happen. I had to. If Bill wasn't back by morning, I knew I would have to tell Sarah and Rachel everything. I really don't like to lie. I began my search. I started from where I had last saw him and worked outwards. There was no sign of him anywhere. I didn't ask anyone if they saw him. I didn't want to bring any more negative attention to myself. But he was nowhere. I also had to be careful to avoid Rachel and Sarah. If they saw me without Bill, I knew there would be questions. Fortunately, the familiar chirp on the walkie-talkie came through after about an hour of searching.
Going to bed, babe. Have fun and don't stay out too late. Big day tomorrow.
I remembered that we had to stop in some port the next day. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. It's not like I could get off the ship and never get back on, especially if Bill didn't turn up. I started retracing my steps. Nothing. I lost track of time, and before I knew it, it was 4:30 a.m. I made my way up to deck 15 slowly and carefully. If someone took Bill, whomever was up there might have an answer to that and all the other questions that sloshed around in my brain. So here I am, at now 5:28 a.m. on deck 15. There's only one staircase up to this area. It's just a small outdoor courtyard, basically as high as you can go on the ship. In other words, someone would only know you were there if they were there with you. The railing that is about 4 feet high surrounds the entirety of the area. broken only where the staircases come up. The area itself is no more than about 10 feet by 10 feet. I was standing directly opposed to the stairway, on the other side of the railing. I scoped out the area and didn't see anything like a camera or audio recording device, so I feel both nervous and relieved that only the person I'm meeting with will know I'm here. Based on whatever happens, I might not be able to respond to comments quickly. Or ever. I heard the gate at the base of the stairs swing open and shut. Someone's coming up. I'll update soon. Hopefully.